Welcome to the Union Federation podcast, where we discuss both Star Trek and the Orville here on the Fandom Podcast Network. And I'm excited for this episode of Union Federation because we're discussing the newest episode of the Orville New Horizons, Season 3, A Tale of Two Topas. This was a good one, intense one as well. I'm your captain, Kevin, and, I need a co-captain here. My best friend, brother from another mother, co-founder of the Fandom Podcast Network. I'd like to bring in Mr. Kyle Wagner.
Did we find mysterious artifacts? I'm looking all around. There's some familiar-looking stuff that they're saying are artifacts, Kevin.
Yes, there is. Are you talking about that little trip our Orville crew went on and, found some booby traps and some artifacts of some ancient people, I guess?
Yeah. Booby traps. Yeah, that's what I said. Booby traps.
Booby traps. Indiana Jones 2 reference there, Kyle. Is that right?
Just booby traps. Just a little bit. Got to give you some Indiana Jones love every once in a while.
Oh, yes. We will be bringing that up later. So anyway, good to have you, man. We're here talking the Orville. The Orville's getting it's getting intense, good intense. It's stepping its game up, even though there really wasn't in any trouble, in my opinion, Kyle.
Yeah, well, I think the whole season has stepped its game up, and it's been a lot more heavy and intense with its episodes. But this one in particular, going back to tying into one of the biggest episodes that we think in the history of the Orville, and coming back around on that, and that's something they've been doing this season as a whole. So, yeah, it's gonna be a very interesting episode to talk about today.
Well, it's just going to be us guys for this episode discussing Orville, A Tale of Two Topas. Amy and Haley couldn't make it, but they'll be back with us later, hopefully maybe for Strange New Worlds. But we are here with you for this ride, and you know what? We're going to get right into it. All right. Orville, New Horizons, A Tale of Two Topas. And before we go on, we just want to let you guys know that we're going to get in spoilerific here, guys. So watch out. All right.
Mr. Wrightsville.
Yeah.
Before we get started in the serious part of this, just a point I want to bring up to the fans. Looking at our notes for the show in front of us, Kevin has a picture of Commander Grayson and Topa standing in front of the Orville's quantum engine, and let's just say that whether it was unintentional or intentional, there's a nice Stargate tribute there with that photo.
Reminds me of that. I forget what episode, but Richard Dean Anderson's character goes, "Yeah, the Stargate flushes sideways."
Well, and what I find even more funny, it's fitting that we get this picture in this episode when at the opening we're kind of in an ancient thing, getting artifacts and things like that. So yeah, a little bit of Stargate line through this episode, whether it was intentional or not, but it's there.
All right, Tale of Two Topas aired on June 30th, 2022, ran an hour and 15 minutes. And here is the captain's log for the episode synopsis. Kelly offers to mentor Topa and help him prepare for the Union prep entrance exam. The two bond, and Topa confides in Kelly that he feels that there's something wrong with him. Kelly feels that Bortus and Clyden should tell Topa that he was born female, but Clyden steadfastly refuses and forbids Topa to continue training with Kelly, which leads Topa to begin having suicidal thoughts. The actions of both Kelly and Bortus lead Topa to the truth of his own origins. Topa decides to return to being a female and asks Claire to reverse the gender reassignment surgery. Clyden protests and threatens to leave Bortus, but Bortus consents. However, the Admiral refuses to allow the surgery, since allowing it would cause Mockless to leave the Union, leaving them vulnerable to the Kaylon. This is where the Union admirals are really cool, Kyle. They just step in, and you really felt like they got the dress down there with them. As well.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I love the admirals in the Orville. Haven't seen a bad admiral yet. As we go on, Claire volunteers to resign her commission in order to perform the procedure without causing an interstellar incident, but Isaac volunteers to perform the procedure as he is not officially a Union officer. Ed orders Isaac not to do it, but then arranges a concert in the shuttle bay for the crew to give Isaac time for the procedure. Despite an attempt by Clyden to stop the surgery, it is successful, and Topa is restored to her female form. Clyden furiously renounces his ties with Bortus and Topa, but Bortus reaffirms his love for his daughter, and Kelly resumes mentoring her. Kyle, I just got chills right now reading that, and I was feeling that same thing while watching this episode. I've got some fun facts I want to bring up, but I want to get your first reactions to watching this for the first time.
Okay, so before I get into the heavy stuff here, the one comment that I'm gonna have a little fun with. Bortus gives a concert, and yet we still haven't heard him get his Celine Dion on. That's all I'm gonna say.
We'll bring up the concert thing.
But no, as far as the episode itself goes, something the Orville's done a lot this season. Another very heavy and powerful episode dealing with some very heavy topics, and truthfully, tying back to the episode that I think for a lot of people, and it's what I tell people, is tying back to the episode that changed my opinion of what the Orville was going to be. And I think there were a lot of things in this
about
episode.
a girl, season 1, episode 3. That was when we felt like, okay, the joking and the stuff was fun. The show looks great. They got some possible good characters, but this is when the Orville grew up, matured.
Yeah, exactly. And here, what I liked about this episode, my first reactions was obviously with the heavy subjects, and especially in today's world, but the fact that there was feelings and emotions for all of these characters that were involved in that About a Girl episode that carried over into this episode. It wasn't something that it was just forgot about and we're coming back to it. And then, sometimes when Star Trek, especially Next Generation, did that, they kind of forgot about some of the emotions or things that happened in the episode it tied into. And
that's a good point.
A lot of kudos to the writers and Seth MacFarlane here for remembering the importance of that episode and coming back to it. And it's so emotionally powerful for so many reasons, whether you're talking about the inner turmoil Topa is having, the turmoil and the stress of the decisions, not only for Bortus, but for Ed and Kelly. And where's doing the right thing crossing boundaries? And again, it was one of the things that really stood out for me too, was Kelly talking about when she was having the conversation with Topa about she knew but didn't say anything. She's like, I'm not your parents. And that's got to cause a lot of great conflict there. And especially for Kelly, who was the representative to prevent this sex change in the first place back in season 1. And of course the decision was made. And I think it showed that she's still carrying that weight of not being able to defend this
burden.
child.
It was a burden for her. Yeah.
And I think that really played out here. And I got to give this episode some credit, Kevin. I don't know in your first reaction if you felt this when you were first watching the episode. I didn't necessarily feel at first that this was the direction they were going to go, when you see Topa in the training simulator and just being so hard on himself at that point. And just, I thought they were going to go maybe in a little bit different direction with it. And they went this direction, and I give them a lot of credit for doing it.
Yeah, that scene, you're right, because I was getting flashbacks to seeing episodes of Worf's son learning what it's like to be a Klingon, and if that's what he really wanted to do, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's great. And you're right. I didn't know where it was going to go either. I did not expect it to go the way it was. But I was kind of curious, like, why does Topa sound like, there's something going on with the voice there? Is it their way of saying Topa's growing up and Topa's like, going through puberty, because how our voices change? And then I realized in the end of what they were doing there, and it was brilliant. And what was interesting too, as I was getting towards the end of the episode, I'm realizing, like, okay, this is kind of a bottle episode. I mean, sort of. It's all taking place on the ship. There is the cool archaeological dig, which is awesome as well. but we're not like fighting anyone away. We're not going, you don't see the Orville flying here and doing that and stuff like that. But the drama in this episode just had me stuck to my seat, wondering like what the heck is happening and what's seen next. And then I saw where it was going and the awesome character moments. I was getting goosebumps on my arm like I am right now, reliving how I was feeling about this. And there was at least 2 times I teared up in this episode because of the emotional gravitas that I was feeling because of how those characters feeling. Seeing Bortus cry, my God, dude, what a gut wrench. Oh God. And just seeing the acting in this episode was phenomenal on all parts. And I love how we also got a few little fun moments in there as well, which I did want to touch on right now. And trust me, guys, we got a lot that we're going to be, we're going to be talking about the core of this episode. Kyle.
Just real quick, Kevin, I wanted to ask you too, one other thing, because you mentioned it and it reminded me. The archaeological dig. Did you kind of feel like they might have gone a direction where they found something in this archaeological dig that would tie to the Mocklins and maybe something in the past and like with how females and stuff like that? Did you feel like that they were maybe going to do something to tie that into, like when the Anson is doing the scan of their DNA?
Yeah, no,
I
was wondering how plot B, I'm just gonna call that plot B, while the whole Mocklin thing and Topa is plot A. I was wondering how they were going to tie together, but I was kind of glad it didn't, because it was more of kind of like we're learning about Charlie's character and her love for archaeology and stuff like that. And so I'm kind of glad that it didn't, but it was a really cool setup, especially when you see that cool alien winged beast, flying for a while, and then you come across this temple, and I'm like, who doesn't want to go in there and like, and there was like a line, I think Grayson said, no buried treasure yet, we want the treasure. And then they found the treasure, which was kind of cool, so yeah. But Kyle, we had a couple of criticisms about the show, about where in the first few episodes, it was kind of heavy. We were kind of missing that Orville fun, but then it kind of started to return a little bit, and then we still getting it, yet still it's not forgetting where it's going with the great drama that we've been seeing. And of course, you mentioned earlier, and by the way, I'm wearing my Latchcomb t-shirt, because it was mentioned, you saw the Latchcombed egg in there, and I was just like, are they going to play this again? We've already seen it, but it was kind of nice to see that. So, but we got Temple of Doom, the place they went to. The species that built the tomb is known to heavily booby-trap their structures. Activating a panel to the primary burial chamber caused a score of deadly arrows to fire out. Isaac activates the trap intentionally so his organic compatriots won't be harmed. That was a funny scene because you got reference to Raiders of the Lost Ark and other scenes that Indiana Jones has been in, and then you got that one sticking.
With Isaac. That scene with Isaac was classic.
Kyle, I don't know if you know this or not. TV series, movies, naked people are funny. Ensign follows his race's edict to not wear any clothing on the first day of the month, meaning he's on duty in the armory stark naked. Kelly convinces him to at least wear pants. I gotta say, I laughed when you see the alien butt from behind. And he's in the armory just kind of doing his thing.
Kevin, didn't you work out something like this with your job at one point too?
I told you that in confidence, Kyle. Be quiet. Okay. 2 seasons after Bortus was interrupted during karaoke night, a Celine Dion song, we finally get to see him singing, and he does a pretty good job. And I love the scene where they're setting up the concert so the procedure can take place, and they can have a reason why they don't know what's going on. And Mercer makes that ship-wide announcement and says, "Please contact Kiali, let her know that you're interested." And you start seeing the screen of all the people wanting, I got to see this. I got to see this. It's kind of like people like tapping into a TikTok video or something like that. And Kiali goes, "Damn, you're one hot ticket, Bortus." And Bortus goes, "I will make sure to bring my, what does Malloy call it? my A game. And then Malloy like gives him the finger guns going, there you go, buddy. And then I love when the concert starts and Claire's son starts playing. He goes, that key is too high.
Now, Kevin, we can't just say Bortus was going to do a Celine Dion song. He was going to go full on Titanic.
Yeah. So... I hope, you know what, Kyle, this is the thing that makes me sad about the Orville. And you mentioned it earlier. We haven't gotten any cool toys, action figures. We've gotten a few things. Like I said, I got that Orville ship behind me, but it's not enough. We haven't got Orville conventions yet. We've got casts showing up at certain conventions, but I need my Bortus, Peter Macon, to do the Celine Dion song. Maybe he will. We'll see.
Here's what we need, Kevin, because we have for sure 3 really good singers on this show right now. Obviously, Seth MacFarlane has put out a few albums himself. Scott Grimes is a phenomenal singing
Adrian
artist.
Palicki sings too.
Yeah. Why we just need Orville. The crew sings the hits. The album.
Yeah, the Orville needs a musical episode. I know it's a TV trope, especially for sci-fi, fantasy. I don't care. Give it to me. You know what? Whether we get a 4th season or not, which probably not, at least get a movie. I hope we get something. Anyway, I don't want to get off the path here. But as you mentioned earlier, Kyle, this episode has connections to About a Girl. And of course, there's been several other episodes with Bortus and Clyden and mentions to Topa and stuff like that. But it was this episode 3 in season 1 that were like, I remember when we were podcasting about it and we had Norm on too, and we were like, whoa, that was not how I thought the end of that episode was going to go. They are committed to making this female-born Moclan, which is looked upon the Moclan male society as an abomination, and they're going to actually turn him into a female. And the drama that ensued because of that with the Orville crew, and especially, with Commander Kelly Grayson, and so you're right. It was one of those, and then the connective tissue that we get in this episode is just amazing with that. And this will get us here into the cast and director. And of course, the director, this is Seth MacFarlane, not only directing it, but writing this episode, Kyle.
Yeah, he was phenomenal. And since we're talking about him writing the episode too, one of the things that was so good about this episode, they convinced me that they were going to end this episode again on a sad note where Topa couldn't get what she needed. And
dude, they were teasing suicide, and that's tough, man.
But I mean, and even in the aspect of without paying attention to the running time at that point, the first watch I had was like, are they going to end this again on a down note like they did the first time around?
Yeah,
because it kind of felt that way. And that I give the credit to the writing to get to sell that aspect of it.
This is further confirmation that we're obviously in our last season of the Orville here. And I am sad, but I'm happy that we're getting a story like this kind of wrapped up to where, okay, now this person, Topa, is happy with herself. But man, would I love to see this character grow and develop and join the Union and just blossom as a character.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. There's a lot of like next generation Orville characters on this show if they ever wanted to do it, where you can tie Marcus, Topa, a few other characters as well. But yeah, I mean, this is it's incredible writing, and that's, when the Orville hits it hits it out of the park, and it's done that the last couple of episodes this season, and like I said, I think just tying it to what many consider the most powerful episode of the Orville to this point, they do a phenomenal job.
Agreed. Now I want to touch on the other cast members real quick, and it was kind of cool that a lot of the main cast members had certain moments. Malloy getting the weird thing on his face because he's allergic and he just had to try the food. With Charlie we're learning more about Charlie and her love for archaeology. There were some really good moments here. We saw Yaphet back too for a little bit. But we had, of course, another Admiral come in. That's Admiral Howland, played by Andy Chapman. And boy, did she dress down our captain and commander for their tactics. Andy Chapman, I'm looking on her IMDb here, been doing a lot of stuff here. She's on General Hospital, Shameless, NCIS. She was on 24 too, for a few episodes. Dexter, 6 Feet Under, a very accomplished actress. And boy, she came in and commanded that role, Kyle.
Yeah. But most importantly, if you hit the Wayback Machine on her filmography on IMDb, in 1989, she was the voice of Storm in the X-Men direct-to-video animated special Pride of the X-Men.
Very cool. Nice find, man. That's very cool. What was your thoughts on Andy Chapman as Admiral Howland?
You know what I liked about her was that she was the first Admiral I think we've seen too, that really carried the weight of the other side. Trying to play both sides. I think we get, when we talk about the bad Admiral in Star Trek, we have too many good Admirals per se. Not when I say good, they're just they're too nice at times for an Admiral. Where you had Admiral Howland who, had her good side, but she was gonna. You broke regulation. You put a major risk on her.
And she had to answer to her higher ups because of the screw up that the Orville commander and captain did. So you see that burden on her as she's like dressing them down.
And they did it in a perfect way where we knew she was kind of still on their side after she dresses them down. And as she's walking out, she says, "Send my regards to Topa."
Yeah.
So, it was probably, honestly, the most feeling Admiral we've had up to this point, as far as if you're going to go with a more military style.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, she was just great. Give it up for Andy Chapman. Now, of course, we had Clyden return for the first time, and of course, Topa. But we're going to get into Chad L. Coleman's performance of Clyden and newcomer Imani Pullman, who played Topa, because there was a different actor that played Topa when he was younger. We're going to get into that and save that for the missions here. But as you know, guys, we love giving credit to our friends over at Den of Geek because they have great writers there. And let's go ahead and discuss this. All right. The Orville New Horizons Season 3, Episode 5 review, A Tale of Two Topas. This is by Michael Wynn Johnson, posted on June 30th, 2022. The Orville New Horizons continues its dramatic and political season with a very topical or topical episode. See what they did there? Topical.
I'm seeing.
All right. Michael goes on to say, Orville fans this season have frequently discussed how much of the show has departed from its original comedic roots. We've been talking about that, Kyle. Where's the fun? And that may be half true. No longer can the Orville be considered almost parody-like in its humor, and no longer do audiences get the trademark Seth MacFarlane jokes at random times. But that does not mean the show has completely forgotten where it came from. Captain Mercer, MacFarlane, has seemingly grown. He's no longer occasionally awkward when the situation calls for diplomacy, and that character perfectly embodies the show's growth. Halfway through its rebirth, the Orville New Horizons have repeatedly shown just how new their approach to storytelling is going to be this season. Mercer and indeed MacFarlane himself seem to have evolved, and with it, this newly more dramatic Orville has really found itself with a careful balance of impactful dramatic moments and more organic lightheartedness. MacFarlane and his writing team have proven time and time again this season that this is what the show should have always been, and has made a few memorable batch of episodes so far. MacFarlane once again pulls triple duty here, having penned, directed, and of course acted in A Tale of Two Topas. This is definitely something fans should note. In the premiere, MacFarlane wrote a powerful intro into the new season with parables about xenophobia, PTSD, and suicide. Yes, this is the same man who constantly wrote diarrhea gags and sex puns earlier in his career. But if anyone doubted his prowess and intelligence as a storyteller, these episodes should be put to rest. MacFarlane was never afraid to deal with the darker, harder to talk about threads of the subject. Either Topa's storyline and her consideration of suicide is absolutely heartbreaking. All of those around Topa who want what's best for the child but are caught up in cultural obligations, parental discretion, or even union politics gave the episode a well-rounded view of the topic of gender identity. So, Kyle, what Michael was talking about in this particular part of the article, and we're going to be mentioning his article again later in the away missions, but I want to have the Seth MacFarlane and Captain Ed Mercer discussion right now, because I've always been a fan of Seth MacFarlane because of his comedy. And yes, I was a huge fan of, Family Guy straight out of the bat. I remember when it got canceled and it came back again. I'm a fan of his comedic movies. Million Ways to Die in the West. I love the Ted movies. But I think that not only him being a Star Trek fan, I think that he also evolved. I'm not going to say matured, because it's just his way of being funny and telling stories, but evolved in storytelling for writing in general for the Orville. And this gave him an avenue to really, okay, I can have fun with this for a while, but I think it's time I get serious here. If I'm a Star Trek fan or a sci-fi fan, what really makes these stories stand out is the drama, is the questions that they raise, because it mirrors our society and how we would do it. And we're also seeing that for his character, because if I'm the creator of a show and I'm looking back at the last season going, that was fun at the moment, but I really want to get here now. And the comment that the writer says about the character of Mercer, when you see him in these command decisions now, because we see him in the first season still feeling a little uncomfortable with the position, but he's glad to be back in it or doing it. We see him making the decisions, even though they may not be right at the time, but he's committed to it. And also during the times with the admirals discussing diplomacy with aliens, not only is Seth MacFarlane evolving, but so is Ed Mercer. Your thoughts?
Well, no, you're hitting the nail on the head here, Kevin, but I think there's even a little bit more to it here, because I really do think Ed Mercer is a representation of Seth MacFarlane's career in Hollywood right now. And let me explain. Obviously, MacFarlane broke in with Family Guy, doing his brand of off the wall kind of crude comedy, things like that. But I also think Seth MacFarlane knew exactly what he was doing. He kicked the door down and found his niche, and it worked for him. And what he did then, and in his way, because if you follow Seth MacFarlane on Twitter, you see just how intelligent this guy is and how in tune he is with the political climate and things like that. I think Seth MacFarlane played the long game here, Kevin. And we talk about this in like Couch Potato Theater, or when we listen to like the Rewatchables, when they talk about Apex Mountain and things like that. When you have the juice to actually do the project you want without anybody questioning it. And I think where MacFarlane got himself to with the Orville was Fox was so determined to keep him for Family Guy and things like that. He got the juice to initially do the Orville, but I don't think he had that full juice yet, because he was still had some Fox constrictions on him. And he
was Funny Guy Seth.
Yeah, so he had to play that game until he built up enough confidence in people in the Orville that he could write these more mature things. And obviously going to Hulu, getting out from under Fox, really, I think also helped with that. But if you look at him in comparison to Ed Mercer, when the series starts, Ed's a bit of a joke. He's a jokester. Yes, he kind of takes things seriously, but it's a very, very loose ship. And as we've seen the things that Ed has gone through between the things with the Krill, his on again, off again relationship with Kelly, everything with the Kalons, everything, he's grown grown more into being a true captain, where everything's not jokey. He still has his fun, but he knows when it's time to be serious and do the job. So I really do think that when he's writing Mercer, he's writing his own career arc as well.
It's interesting you say that, and great point, Kyle. the long game. You're right. I think this was in you know, when you were starting to talk about, like, yeah, okay, he maybe this was part of the plan, because there's a few things when you were talking that I thought of. Great comments, by the way. Well done. That when he wanted to start the Orville, obviously he already had his following with his comedy. Okay. And we're like, oh, wait a minute. He's going to be making fun of Star Trek or a parody of Star Trek. Because that's the way it kind of came out when it was first put out there.
Galaxy Quest. That's what we were all thinking.
Yeah. It was going to be like Galaxy Quest, Bailey. But then we were pleasantly surprised, but there were still the jokes in the first season, you know, and it turned some people off. I remember Amy saying she wasn't digging it, but then she stayed with it and she was glad that she did. And she wasn't alone. There's people like, and there's still people out there going like, well, I don't want to, if I want to watch a show about Star Trek, why don't I just watch Star Trek, you know? And I heard that a lot, and that's fine. But for him to command a show, write a show, live acting, by the way, and really turn it into what it is, shows that he has these other sides of him that need to be explored. And as you mentioned, his juice, the power that he was getting to be able to do what he wanted and bring this great crew together. And I'm going to refer to a film that is a comedy, and that's A Million Ways to Die in the West. For those of you who haven't seen it, on the outside, it looks like it is what it is. It's a Western and it's a comedy, right? And there's some very, very funny moments. But one of the moments in this movie that I actually like the best are the moments with Charlize Theron, where you kind of buy him as this insecure but yet still leading man. And the romantic moments and the character moments that they have when they're bonding are absolutely wonderful. And they're very charming. And I felt like that this was kind of like another step in his evolution. And then, of course, he does Ted, which is great. It's funny. You know, I wouldn't say it's like this evolution of, you know, of Seth MacFarlane, but they're both very funny films in their own way. And that's kind of him doing his thing. But there was moments in A Million Ways to Die in the West, I was going, you know what? This guy could go different directions. And then he does with the Orville. And so, yeah, great points on that, Kyle. So now there's another character here, of course, that we all love and crucial to this episode of A Tale of Two Topas. And of course, that's Commander Kelly Grayson. And I want to talk about her briefly because Michael Wynne Johnson, the author of this Den of Geek article, goes on to say, this is arguably one of the strongest ensemble work as well, with Palicki, Macon Coleman, and young star Pullman all giving very believable performances. Palicki's passion about Topa's best interest is a motherly side of Grayson not really shown before. Her coming to blows with Clyden over what was the best for Topa didn't seem over the top or forced, and Coleman does well to vilify Clyden's perhaps outlandish views without making him seem unjustified. So this, even though it's about Topa, in a way, this is a Adrian Kelly Grayson episode, Kyle. And I think it's important to note her character development and these motherly instincts of, it's sad to say, but when the relationship between Grayson and Mercer came to a divorce, motherly opportunity left at the door. And now we're starting to see that.
Yeah, here's the other thing, though. And you talk about motherly. I think with Kelly being in that commander position, she almost is mother. She's the mother of the ship. She's mother to everybody on the crew. We've seen her many a times with Malloy kind of mothering him, like, grow up, you know. Where Mercer's the captain and he's in charge, Kelly's kind of the one that is the moral support and is kind of the mother of the crew. But yet we've seen her grow. And one of the things that I really liked about this episode, too, is when Clyden confronts Grayson and Clyden brings up the fact, oh, are you still feeling godlike from when you were worshipped as a god from the other episode?
Oh, God,
and
yeah.
I think that's a very important point because, yeah, that when you have an experience like that, even though you think it's right or wrong, it affects your ego. And I think it was a great point for Clyden to throw out there. But we also have seen the growth in Kelly between the time travel episodes and everything like that. And I think she's fine with the aspect of giving up the motherly of her own children because she feels she has a ship full of children that she has to look out for here. And
especially when she makes a comment to Topa when he at the time is shadowing her, and how dealing with crew difficulties and conflicts falls under her position, which is in a way in a motherly aspect.
Yeah. But I think the other thing is too, and I kind of brought this point up earlier, is I think there is an extra involvement for her with Topa because of her failing Topa back in season 1.
Yeah.
Not being able to. So she's got an investment into Topa as well. And I like the fact that they played up on that. Instead of Topa going to Mercer, it is Commander Grayson who was defending Topa and trying to prevent Topa from having the gender altering surgery back in season 1. So it makes that connection even more special, and it has more meaning because they decided to go with that connection. And then you add in the aspect of her being there for Bortus too, when her and Bortus have that conversation and she's apologizing and Bortus is like, no, you don't need to apologize. You did the right thing. I was the one who sent her the password to find out the truth. Because if you remember back in the season 1 episode, Bortus decided against the change. Keep Topa as she was. And so with everything with Grayson, it's an interesting evolution for her. I still think as a whole, Mercer has probably evolved the most of the characters
and this is something we were wanting. We wanted to see more episodes with Mercer because it seemed like seems like Seth was letting the rest of the cast shine, but not him enough.
Yeah. And I want to go back to one thing because I think it shows their growth in both of them and in growth in how the relationship has changed. When Mercer's talking about writing letters to his daughter.
Oh, yeah.
And she's like, you even though we're divorced, you continue to surprise me.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great statement on people who get married, maybe married too young or aren't ready for it, and they do it. And then they realize later in life, as they grow and have experiences, what they loved about that person. And they respect it more, whether they actually get together or not. In this case, we're seeing it where it's two people who, even if they don't get back together, they have a love for each other. That's a bond that's more than just the relationship.
Kyle, my brother, you're killing it, man. Well said. Seriously.
Well, thank you, sir.
Well said. I got to give it for Adrian. Okay, let me be honest here. I first discovered Adrian in Friday Night Lights, like you and I, right? Friday Night Lights, right?
Friday Night Lights. She was on a couple episodes of Supernatural, and I think a lot of people discovered her too when she played Mockingbird on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for a couple of seasons too.
And then I loved her in the G.I. Joe movie she did as Lady J. She was great. Beautiful lady. But man, I got to tell you, this series is really showing her acting chops again. And when I say again, she was great in Friday Night Lights. Watching her expressions of especially during the moments in this episode, like with Clyden and Bortus or in front of Topa, of her constraining herself by not saying too much and listening to the respects of Clyden when he asked her to leave at the time, her not saying too much to Topa, but leaving some breadcrumbs, and then her going to Mercer and Claire about maybe her stepping over bounds and getting their opinion on it. Watching Adrian's face during these moments, she is just knocking it out of the park with her acting overall and just really getting the character.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree 100%. I think it's something to this season where you feel like the characters are really kind of fitting into their suit. You know, that the actors are fitting into the suit of their characters because they've had a couple of seasons and now this third season to really work it in. And that's the frustrating part. If we are coming to the end of the Orville, it feels like it's hitting its peak right as it's coming to an end.
Michael Wynn Johnson, of course, of Den of Geek, finishes off saying the new direction of New Horizons has certainly given its fans some very heavy subjects at times already, but it's most certainly working for the show overall. If McFarlane and the creative team can better remember the keys to their early success, perhaps a little more often, then episodes like this can both educate and entertain for now. A Tale of Two Topas and episodes like it may simply have to be satisfied that, quote, educate can be powerful on its own and be content with broaching an important real life issue. And what he's referring to is earlier in the article, he was missing some of the things that we were missing, Kyle. Not just the fun, but the things that kind of make the character of the Orville ship and the people in it kind of quirky and fun, and not overshadowing it with these very dramatic episodes, finding a nice balance. And that's why he gives it 3 out of 5 as opposed to 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 5. And so that's where at least my interpretation of Michael's article, and we're going to return to some of his stuff a little bit later. But this has been a great start to this episode. We've got a lot more to get into. Up after the break here, we've got trivia, and then we're going to hit into our away missions. But first, we're going to let you know what else is happening on the Fandom Podcast Network. Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. We'd like to continue to feed your ears by inviting you to listen to these other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. It starts with our flagship show, Culture Clash, discussing the latest in entertainment pop culture. Bloody Kings, Immortals Take Notice, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theaters, where we celebrate our favorite movies. Time Warp, the Fandom Flashback podcast discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie and TV pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Union Federation, our Star Trek and Orville show. Hair Metal, the 80s and early 90s rock metal podcast. Type 40, our show covering the time-traveling Doctor Who universe with host Dan Hadley. Lethal Mullet, an 80s and 90s action film podcast with host Adam P. O'Brien. Also check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast with hosts Scott, Derek, and Nathan. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast, a deep dive into the final frontier with host Mark Newbold and Adam P. O'Brien. And check out our newest shows, The Fandom Show, our monthly Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube exclusive show about the month's hottest topics in fandom, and the FPN True Believers MCU podcast, discussing the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the related Marvel television and streaming MCU universe, including the connections to the original Marvel comics. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on several platforms. Please subscribe to the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel to receive notifications of new podcast episodes and live events. You can enjoy all of the Fandom Podcast Network audio podcasts on our master feed at fpnet.podbean.com. The Fandom Podcast Network is on all major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast and iTunes. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. You can also find the Fandom Podcast Network on Instagram at Fandom Podcast Network and on Twitter at FanPod Network. Thank you for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom. All right, welcome back to Union Federation, episode 137. We're discussing the Orville New Horizons season 3 episode 5, A Tale of Two Topas. And we're going to continue with some Easter eggs and some trivia here, Kyle. We've got some interesting stuff here, especially one of the things that we were looking forward to with the Orville moving to Hulu was getting longer episodes, because we had those hour-long episodes originally with commercials and stuff like that. And then there was, I think one of the episodes, maybe it was episode 2 or whatever, we were wondering, like, are they using their time wisely? Well, Kyle, this episode runs approximately 76 minutes long, including all credits, but not commercials. This places it as both the longest episode of the season and the series to date, eclipsing the season premiere Electric Sheep by approximately 6 minutes. I got to tell you, Kyle, watching this episode, I wasn't looking at my watch wondering, like, what's going on. This episode had me enthralled every second. What about you?
Yeah, I would agree. I think the last two episodes of the Orville are the ones that have really taken advantage of the extra time properly. You didn't feel like you had these places where it was like, they could have cut this part out.
Like the mortality paradox, that could have been used better. So yeah.
Or even in the first episode, it had a few lag periods in there. I think they're kind of hitting their stride with these longer episodes now, because, like I said, these last two have really nailed it.
Topa's played by Umani Pullman, who is obviously female, even in heavy makeup, with her voice altered to a deeper pitch. This serves to telegraph the ending where Topa is allowed to have the surgery performed when she was an infant reversed. Halston Sage makes a brief non-speaking cameo as Lieutenant Alara Kitan, and via the use of archival footage from season 1. Got to tell you, that scene that Commander Grayson takes Topa to see the hearing that they have that we saw from that episode 3, season 1, Kyle, that was really cool.
Yeah. I got to ask you something since we're talking about this right now. Was there any points where you thought they were going to maybe take them back to that female Mokulant refugee area?
Yes. The Sanctuary? Was that the episode?
Yeah, and that's where they would take Topa to maybe get the sex change done there?
Yeah, oh, totally. And by the way, quick shout out to Rena Owen, who played Havina in that episode. She returned. We got to see that again. And seeing Topa's response to seeing that, didn't say anything, but it said a lot. Yeah. But yes, I did think they were going to possibly use that. And but I wasn't disappointed they didn't. I love the way this episode ended. So yeah.
Oh no, absolutely. I was just curious to see if you were, because I was thinking that it's like, oh, this is how they're going to get around the surgery thing, is to go there. But
Imani Pullman becomes at least the third actor to portray the character of Topa. Topa was previously played by Blesson Yates, a male actor, and at least one unknown baby. The season 1 uniform, of course, makes a brief return with the footage of About a Girl. I got to ask you, Kyle, looking back at the season 1 uniforms with the different logos and stuff, I get a little nostalgia for those a little bit.
I don't know. I'm liking this. I'm liking this season uniforms.
No, I do too. But when I go back and go like, that's kind of cool, because I remember some of our friends, and yes, I have like a group of Orville costumers. We had gotten together at Dragon Con a few years ago, a few times, and that was a lot of fun. And then when the second season came out, the newer designs were coming out. But I'm not saying it reminds me, and I look back of those jumpsuits from season 1 and 2 of Star Trek Next Gen, which weren't great. But I still like them. Among the artifacts, and I noticed this after watching it the second time, Kyle, among the artifacts brought in the Orville from the burial chamber was a pair of Batman scalped bracers, similar to the ones worn in Batman Begins. Remember when he accidentally shoots them across? Did you get that?
Yeah, that so had a Malloy moment where he touches it, and one of them would should have went flying up.
They did miss a comedy moment there. Might have been a little too on the nose, but when I saw those, I'm going, oh man, and they're right there. They're easy to see. I'm like, those are Batman gauntlets.
Yeah, exactly.
And I love the little attention to detail here. The artwork hanging on the wall next to Kelly Grayson's office door is the cover art for Journey's album Escape, otherwise known as E5C4P3, which, if you look at it, spells escape. I didn't notice that the first time, but I love when they do this because, of course, she sings a Journey song earlier in the seasons. Did you catch that?
Yeah, I did catch that, and that's typical Kelly, because they've always tied her into more of the 80s 90s pop culture stuff.
Yes,
and I think just about any character outside of maybe Malloy.
Yeah, agreed. All right, let's get into the nitty gritty here, guys. We got a couple of away missions to get to, so let's head on down there. All right, away mission number 1, Colliden and Bortus discussion. Then a Geek article, of course, by Michael Wynn continues saying, Grayson recognizes that this is perhaps symptomatic of Topa's gender identity, and the reassignment surgery he has had as an infant goes to discuss the matter with Colliden and Bortus. The conversation goes as expected, with Colliden angrily citing hundreds of years of Moclan tradition and telling Grayson that she is very much out of line for even broaching the subject. Bortus is much more level-headed about the subject, simply stating that they had yet to make a decision about whether or not to inform Topa about his death. Coleman, for as much as he brings this episode, is a believable counter-argument. It is trapped within the inescapable Mobius strip of the script. Colliden's entire arc is merely scream, threaten, get physical, restrain, repeat. Surely, in an episode that does show some nuance, there was more nuance to be found with Colliden's character, including tapping into his birth story, which he was also biologically female, and why that further motivates him to do what he thinks is best for Topa. Now, there's a scene that it gets me every time. I've seen this episode 3 times right now, and I've got it playing again for the 4th time. Bortus to Kaleiden, they're having discussion here as Kaleiden is packing to leave. Quote, have you no room in your heart for tolerance? What inner fulfillment are you enjoying from this devotion to tradition that is so potent it drives you from your family? And then Topa to Kaleiden, Papa, I love you. Kaleiden to Topa, I wish you were never born. Kaleiden leaves. Bortus to Topa, listen to me very closely. You are perfect. Now, I want to talk about Kyle, Kaleiden, and Bortus and how, in a way, we kind of felt this was going to come to fruition because there was always something that Bortus was struggling with this decision. But in order to keep his marriage together with Kaleiden, keeping him happy, and also realizing the ramifications of the Moclan, way of life and how it would look bad on them and also be possibly very dangerous for Topa if they found out that, they wanted to reverse this. There's a lot to dive in here, but I think what's really important and what I wanted to bring up is, let me mention here on 2 separate occasions, Kaleiden attempts to attack someone. Both times he fails miserably. Kelly performs an admirable but a bit of self-defense to subdue him, and Isaac merely restrains him with such force that it causes him pain. Kaleiden's losing it here, Kyle. Are we glad that the relationship ended? Did it? Will it? Have we seen the last of Kaleiden? I want to get your thoughts on this relationship here. Lots to dive into, I know. Just pick apart.
Well, no, first and foremost, before I do anything, I got to give props to Chad L. Coleman. He is one of the most underrated actors we have going today.
Even if you don't like his character, he's awesome.
Right. He's phenomenal as Kaleiden because he makes you dislike this character. But here's the issue with Kaleiden, and this is what, a lot of people just see Kaleiden as this jerk, and, in my second watch of this episode, and yes, they portrayed the Kaleiden character as unlikable, and not just with this matter, but with several matters that have happened over the history of the Orville. But especially in this episode, there's a part of me that feels Kaleiden's own pain. And let me explain this here. Here is Kaleiden, who went through the change himself, had the gender reassignment surgery, was never probably even given a remote choice in the matter. And he talks about the despair he felt when he found out about it and wishing he had never found out about it. And you've got to take that into consideration, where Kaleiden, in his own way, is trying to protect his child because he doesn't want his child to experience things that he went through, and he doesn't want to see Topa experience the persecution that Topa would go through if Topa had this gender reassignment. So again, how he carries out those motivations is incredibly wrong. But there is a bit of a heart behind those motivations. But I think the 2 scenes that really stand out for me, that really reflect what's going on with Kaleiden, obviously when he confronts Commander Grayson, and Grayson basically humiliates him, and he gets basically defeated by a woman. That's the ultimate embarrassment for any Moclan.
Yeah.
But also when he confronts Isaac, and Isaac just stops him dead, and there's that scene where Isaac kind of throws him down, and you see Kaleiden turn, and he just kind of has this look of horror on his face, like horrific, something horrific. Like, and he doesn't know what he's processing, and
Coleman sells it through that makeup, dude.
Yeah, and I get what the writers are talking about, where the writer of the article is talking about where they should have played up more on the fact that Kaleiden had the gender assignment. That should have been a bigger part of this. I don't think Kaleiden is ready to deal with that yet. And I think if we see Kaleiden again before the Orville ends, it's going to be an episode where he's dealing with his own personal demons. And I think they've left that open to have that kind of episode. But I think it was important that they played it out like this, because let's be honest with you, this is probably something for a lot of parents who have a child who is transgender or LGBTQ, that I bet you there's a split within them. And I think I think that reflects that. And it's, whether we like it or not, it's a harsh reality. And so Bortus, who's always been accepting of Topa no matter what, and you have Clyden, who has been so indoctrinated and so brainwashed in the old tradition. And it's I think it's something, when we look at what's going on in our world around us today, we are in that conflict right now of tradition versus how the worldview is changing. And I think this is a great reflection on that. Yes, Clyden is a jerk. Clyden carries himself like a jerk. But I think there has to be a little bit of sympathy for Clyden underneath all that, because I think there's a lot of scar tissue with Clyden as well. And I think that's something that if they bring Clyden back before this season is over, they can play on that.
I'm glad you said that, Kyle, because there's a lot of fans that hate this character because of the people in their real lives that he may reflect and remind them of. And I think it's important to, if we're going to exercise tolerance, I think that understanding where Chad Coleman's portrayal of Clyden is coming from and the story that he has come from, it's important to know all, or at least consider as much as you can if you yourself is going to exercise tolerance. I mean, when Bortus says, have you no room for the heart of tolerance? And I think this is important coming from Bortus himself, Kyle, because there's a few things I was thinking of when I was watching this episode and trying to remember back on the moments of their relationship, trying to go think about like what we've learned from Bortus and what he has gone through learning from the Union crew and, you know, living among humans and other people and living outside of the Moclan culture. You know, it's had its funny moments too with Jaloja and stuff like that. And his addiction to, well, porn basically. But when you come down to it, his character is also is evolving and learning about understanding and tolerance. Why can't the man that he's married to and has a relationship with is being a parent to, why can't Clyden learn from his mate? And then it made me think of, did they write the story or give us enough to convince why did Bortus want to marry and become his mate in the first place?
Yeah, there's something there.
Yeah, I have to. They have to. You know, but this is an interesting parallel on real relationships with us, that there's something in common that they have, and they think that that's strong enough to nurture a relationship. And then when you start going through the trials of a relationship, you realize, you know, okay, maybe this isn't working out. We may have this in common. But I think that also Chad's performance in this regarding Clyden, and it's easy to come down on Clyden saying, I'm really glad it ended this way. This guy was a freaking jerk. He is the reason why we have racism and tolerance or intolerance and hatred and stuff like that. But I think it's important that Clyden also represent that, you know, this is this way of not learning tolerance and maybe making changes and realizing maybe the way that you were born and brought up, that there's always room to expand your beliefs, expand your heart, and not necessarily, you know, he's always been really worried about Topa's well-being. He's coming from the right. He there's a certain part of his heart that's coming in the right direction, but he's doing it the wrong way, I think, is the message here. And that I think that if there is any more moments of Clyden's return, is that maybe there will be, I'm not saying a redemption, maybe it just ends this way, and maybe it's best left that way, and we only have 5 episodes left possibly of this entire series. If Clyden can finally, and I'm not saying to see away of his errors, but him also realizing, look, I don't have my mate anymore. I don't have my child anymore. Maybe it's time I do something about it, instead of being afraid of what my culture is going to say against me.
I want to throw this out too, Kevin, because I think it's an interesting thing, and I've never seen anybody bring this up, and I just think it's fascinating when I think about it. We're talking about a couple having tolerance, but we were talking about a gay couple basically having tolerance. And the reason why I say that is I think it's an important message that say too that tolerance has to come from all sides.
Yeah.
It can't come from it can't be just one side accepting the other side. Tolerance has to be equal from all sides. It can't. It's not a one-way street here. And I think the fact that you're having basically a gay couple having this tolerance issue over a transgender child, and I think there's a lot of underlying things here that I hope everybody opens their eyes to, because at the end of the day, we have to have, no matter what our sexual preferences, what our gender is, what our beliefs are, whatever, if we can't have a little level of tolerance and understanding, we're all going to be Clydens. And that's not a place any of us want to be.
Well said again. And bridging on what you just said, Seth's writing this story arc here with Topa, done in a science sci-fi way, is basically reminding us, and if isn't reminding you, will remind you that there are millions of people out there that are struggling with gender identity and the burden that they carry because they are afraid of what their loved ones or society will say to them. And there is people out there that are supportive and that will help you through it. And when Topa is thinking about suicide, and that wonderful moment where Isaac comes to Commander Grayson and says, I think you need to know what's going on, in his way, is a mirror of what's happening out there right now. And that we need to, just be aware of that, people that are struggling and keeping this to themselves and not seeing a way out, that there is help there. And that just hit me in the feels so hard, Kyle. It really did.
I think for me, just to close out on this particular topic too, and you talk about tolerance and everything like that, this is something I've believed for a while now, and I don't expect everybody to agree with me on it. I don't expect everybody to just fall in line with it, because we all think differently. But at the end of the day, we are all of the same race, and that is the human race. And that's where it starts. And when we all branch off into our different things that make us who we are, but we all come from a same core, and that's being human beings. And we have to look at each other as a starting point, and realize beneath everything else, there's emotions there, there's feelings, there's a heart there, and agree, disagree, whatever. We have to start there and make that our starting point, and then build from there to where we don't see a race, a gender, a sexuality. Yes, that's part of that person, but that isn't everything that defines that person. And we have to have the tolerance to say that this one aspect is this person. And we start with that by saying, you know what? We all bleed the same blood. We all have this. Start there and move forward from there, and have tolerance to learn and understand the different directions from there. But to realize we all have the same emotions. We all have the same hearts. We have the same body parts. We were made up of the same stuff, and everything else is just part of a path for everybody. Everybody has their own individual path, and we just have to have the tolerance to learn and understand that path, even if we don't necessarily agree with it. Just because what's not right for you doesn't mean it's not right for somebody else.
Quick question, Kyle. Have we seen the last of Clyden? Are we going to see him again?
I think it's a 50-50 shot at this point. I wouldn't be surprised to see him pop up before this season is over, but if we don't, it's not going to be a shocker either.
I think that, like you said before, Seth is in the long game too with writing this. And there is tensions between the Union and Moklis, but they're working together as well, hopefully with the Krill again, because of the overall threat of Isaac's race. And I'm hoping that the Moklins will bring Kalyden back into this when it comes to a serious threat, and we'll get Coleman to I'm not saying a redemption moment, but a realization moment maybe, and we get to see him back, because I don't want people to go, thank God Kalyden's gone, man. That guy was a dick or whatever. You touched on it earlier. There's more there that we need to pay attention to. And if he can come around, that would be a nice message to top this season off. I'm just saying. All right, guys, let's get into the other discussion here about Topa with the young Imani Pullman for away mission number 2. Den Geek article continues. Imani Pullman, who is stepping into the role of Topa for the first time, the character was previously played by Blessin Yates, taps into absolutely stellar emotional depths that she becomes the standout of this episode. To see her have such a developed perspective on the existential crisis of Topa is a testament to a young actress and the emotional maturity she must possess. In the end, it is decided that Topa should go through the gender reassignment surgery. Isaac, as a non-union officer, is the only one who can perform the procedure on Topa to realign her gender to avoid the aforementioned union politics. An unintentional touch from McFarlane's script, as if it was written years ago, is the coincidental topic nature of the union telling Mercer and crew they cannot perform the procedure. This plot point is at least somewhat relatable to Supreme's Court recent decision to indicate what's best for the citizens of the United States, and how a governing body can often try to tell people what to do with their own bodies, all in the guise of politics. Boy, did this episode, I'm not going to necessarily say dropped at the right time, but man, it felt like it was almost planned, even if it wasn't, and maybe it was dropped at the right time, Kyle. Topa struggles with the identity and is confused and scared. Kyle, did you ever think that the Topa character arc would turn this way? And are you happy with the direction that it went?
I had a feeling at some point they would revisit this, because it's too heavy of a topic. And I didn't, let me put it this way. If I would have not seen it, it wouldn't have surprised me. Seeing that they did it doesn't surprise me either. But how well they executed it, and again, I agree with this article, the performance by this young lady to make this performance, when it's something to where, even if it isn't a transgender issue or a sexual identity issue, this is a young lady who's probably going through her own emotional turmoil at times, just being of that age. We've all been there. So, it's tapping a certain understanding, and I think it's very well done. And I think I'm glad they revisited it. Like you said, how it drops. I mean, it's obviously coincidental, I think, in that aspect. But where we are in a place right now to where there's so much that I think as a people we are trying to figure out where the lines are and where the lines should be. And everybody has a different opinion on that. And I think this episode represented that very well, because in this case, there was a lot of things to consider. Yes, they could do this, but you're talking about making enemies out of somebody who you desperately need as an ally too. And like the Admiral said at the end, they got lucky, because as it turned out, having a Kaylon do the procedure was actually just inspired the Moklins more to want to destroy the Kaylon. So they got lucky, but it went in a very, very bad direction as well. And that's the fine line you walk with anything, is that it can go one of several ways, or one of two ways. And in this episode they got lucky, but the truth of the matter is that for us, it feels like this story changes on an almost daily basis anymore, Kevin.
Yeah. Well said again, man. Well said. this was a very timely episode, and with the Roe versus Wade overturn and the question of control, having other people control over your body and the decisions is just heartbreaking right now. And this episode epitomized many feelings about that, and people questioning who they are. And I at times I feel inadequate to even break the surface of that, because at times I don't feel qualified. I'm able to even discuss it. But man, am I sympathetic, and it hurts me. I'm not happy with these decisions the government has done, and it just kills me of my friends that are going through the emotional struggle of these decisions that are made outside of their control. And it makes you think about how you can change and the things that you can say and do. And I want to touch on Imani Pullman, who is just absolutely amazing in this. And she's done some other work. She's been busy since 2008, where she did Yo Gabba Gabba, and she's an up and coming actress. And I can't wait to see what we have in store for Imani Pullman in the future, whether it's more Orville appearances or if it's more acting. Kyle, she was absolutely amazing, because like Commander Grayson, Adrian's character, she was able to say so much without saying anything. Her expressions were so calculating, as you can tell. She was, struggling with what was going on. And Imani as Topa was just amazing to see that. Did you notice these expressions through that heavy makeup? And especially when she confronts Bortus and Clyden, about the truth. I mean, God.
Well, yeah, and it's a phenomenal performance by her through that makeup and picking the moments to express the emotion. This young lady is incredibly talented. This young lady also has been under the wing of one Debbie Allen, Kevin. So she's got some great support around her. But no, she was phenomenal in this episode. This young lady has a very bright future in whatever the acting way she wants to go. But she was incredibly powerful in this episode. And the thing is she made the situation sympathetic.
Yeah.
And I think there are times when you have situations like these, how people act can sometimes affect how you're sympathetic towards them.
Yeah.
And I think that's walking a fine line. And I think they've walked that line very well here with it. And they could have gone over the top and carried it like a hammer, but they handled it with finesse, and they did a very good job with it.
Well said. I just want to mention a bittersweet ending here. Bortus and Clyden's marriage finally falls apart, and Clyden disowns Topa. However, the crew rallies to help Topa live her true self, while Bortus reaffirms that he loves her as she is. And seeing her take the bridge and letting her make the decision, it hit the feels for me, man. It's hitting feels for me right now.
No, it's a great moment because it brings the episode full circle, because it shows that everything that Topa's been through, she's in an environment that she's accepted, she's loved, and she has the opportunities. And it puts the emphasis on it. And one of the things I really liked about what Commander Grayson did with Topa is, even though Topa was going through all this stuff, she still was like, you're going to go through this command training. You have to earn this. It's not going to be handed to you. And that's an important message in itself, because I think it's important that people realize you have control of your life, and you have control of making what your life can be. Yes, there's outside influences, but you still have, at the end of the day, you still have the say of how you handle situations. And I love how Kelly was helping Topa understand how to handle her situations, even as Kelly was struggling with how to handle it herself.
Yeah, well said, man. I wanted to ask you, did you have any other comments or reactions to this week's episode? You've been doing a great job, man. I'm proud of you. I was wondering how us two male nerds was going to be able to tackle this topic by ourselves. And you did some great job. You did a great job there, man. Anything else you want to bring up?
Well, I just want to say this because it is a hard time right now, and there's a lot of people who feel like they shouldn't comment or they're not qualified to comment. You brought that up, Kevin. There's a difference between commenting and just throwing out an opinion, but commenting and listening back and learning. And that's what that's what this episode showed, and that's what we as a people need to be doing. We need to quit. Being Clydens, yelling at the top of our lungs, demanding everything like that. It doesn't accomplish anything. We need to talk. We need to not only say what we think, but be able to learn. We also need to not be destroyed if our thoughts aren't exactly in tune with somebody else's. Because the point is we all approach things from a different way from our own life experiences. And we need to keep that in mind when before we just go out there and say something, judge somebody, rebuttal somebody. Stop and think that this person, we all have our uniqueness. We're all unique. We're not a hive of all the same thoughts. Because we all look at things through our own experiences in life. Yes, there's things I'm not going to be, I don't feel I'm qualified to comment on either, but that doesn't mean I shouldn't ask questions. I shouldn't try to learn.
Well said.
And that's what we need to do right now. We need to be supportive, but we need to ask questions and we need to learn. We can't just be silent.
And you can't just be on social media putting your opinion out there and only searching for the people that agree with you. There's not enough tolerance on social media, and we need to bring it back to that. And it shouldn't be and you shouldn't be afraid to put stuff out there without being tolerant against pushback of someone with a different opinion, hopefully with respect, which is the way it should be done. So well said, Kyle. Well, let's go ahead and let's head back to the ship here. And let's wrap this up with some contact information here. Where our subspace signals. You've been watching and listening. Of course, if you've been watching, you're on our Fandom Podcast YouTube channel. Thank you very much for that. And if you're listening to this, make sure you check us out there as well. Union Federation, this is episode 137, New Horizons for the Orville, season 3, episode 5, Tale of Two Topas. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network and Union Federation on these subspace channels. Subscribe, please. We love more support on the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel, and you'll get notifications and give us a like and share. Our master feed for all of our audio podcasts can be found on Podbean, fpnet.podbean.com. And of course, join our Union Federation podcast Facebook group where we're discussing both the Orville and, of course, Star Trek. And Union Federation Podcast is also on Twitter and Instagram. If you'd like to contact us directly, you can email us at theunionfederation@gmail.com. My name is Kevin Reitzel. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Spartan_Phoenix. Kyle, where can we find you on the socials?
You can find me on socials on Twitter at AKyleW, on Instagram at AKyleFandom, and of course you can find me on Facebook as well, all over the Fandom Podcast Networks, many different pages, including the main Fandom Podcast Network page and of course the Union Federation page.
Awesome. And Haley is on Twitter at Trekkie01D. And of course, Amy's on Twitter at Miss Amy Nelson. And we're working with Amy and the BQN Network, combining forces, sharing a lot of love for Star Trek. And BQN is on Twitter and Instagram at BQN Podcast. And of course, they have their own wonderful Facebook group called the BQN Collective. That's their listeners group. Kyle, let's look into the Orb of Prophecy for the next episodes of the Union Federation. And in a few minutes, we're going to be recording the next episode, Union Fed, but we're going to be talking about episode 9 of Strange New Worlds. That is For All Those Who Wander. And then next week, it ends for season 1 of Strange New Worlds. In that episode is called A Quality of Mercy, and that comes out July 7th. Kyle?
Just a quick note too. Episode 9 of Strange New Worlds. You needed tissues for this episode of the Orville. You're going to need tissues for a whole different reason for the next episode of episode 9 of Strange New Worlds.
Do you want to clarify what you mean by that without spoiling?
Yeah, let's just say that there's sadness in both. There's some emotional moments in both of these episodes, but they're of a totally different quality.
Okay, I just want to make sure you clarify that. The Orville New Horizons Season 3 continues with Episode 6 called Twice in a Lifetime, and I think it has something to do with Malloy, if I'm reading IMDb correctly, so we'll find that out. Kyle, thank you so much again for coming on. Always love podcasting with you, and your comments, I got to give you credit. You hit it out of the park this week. Thank you.
This was a powerful episode, and you handled yourself quite well in the captain's chair. And hopefully by the next episode, we will have the full complement of crew back, and we're not going to let them get off the hook for their thoughts on this episode. So hopefully we're going to be able to get them back and get them to drop a few thoughts in our next episode as well.
All right, guys, we're going to warp out of here. Thank you, everyone. Hailing frequencies are now closed.